The second paper in this session will be presented by Mr. Julio Vega-Payne, a PhD candidate in the Department of Classics at the University of California, Santa Barbara. He expects to graduate in 2022. His doctoral thesis concerns the depiction of the natural world in Homer's poetry. Now, Mr. Julio Vega-Payne wants to put forth his paper, Conflagration as a Signal of Change in the Iliad of Homer. The subject centers around the simile in the Iliad Book 2, lines 780 to 785, in which the Ahaioi marching upon the earth are compared to Typhoeus' eruption in the land of Arimi. Please, Julio, you can start speaking.
Thank you, and thank you, and I like to share Maxwell's thoughts as well. Thanks to the organizers and to all the speakers who have gone and who have yet to go. This is really just a fascinating kind of conference to be a part of. It's very interesting to get so many different kind of insights into this topic, which is still obviously very significant and relevant to our lives now, climate and the environment. So so thank you for the work that you've done to kind of put this together. And I'd also like to apologize for not being more active earlier. I'm on the west coast of the United States in California, so the conference started for me at 4:30 in the morning. So I'm on my second cup of coffee now. But thanks. And before I put up my PowerPoint, I would like to just kind of start by saying how I got interested in the first place in the topic for today, which is conflagration and wildfires. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. At the end of the 2017 and in the beginning of the year 2018, we here in California experienced our largest recorded wildfire. At the time, I should say, and I'll come back to that at the end of the presentation, what's called the Thomas Wildfire, which stretched from Ventura to Santa Barbara County. On a personal level, it was a very interesting time. Our classics department here at UC Santa Barbara, you know, we had an emergency contact list going in case any of us needed to evacuate. The evacuation zones kept spreading, it seemed, by the hour. And, you know, fortunately for me, my partner at the time, my now wife, was living in Long Beach, which is about 2 hours south from Santa Barbara. And I was able to kind of go there and escape the ashen air and the very difficult conditions. And you know, for that, I have to say that I was lucky. A lot of people lost their homes and much worse. That devastation that was left, you know, 2 and 3 years ago now, on a human and geographical level, is still being felt today. And as a result of kind of the extreme and unprecedented damage that happened because of those fires, you know, the rain that same month brought deadly mudslides as well, which were really very unfortunate. 2 years later, in 2020, I was driving up from my now home in Long Beach to the UCSB campus. And I thought, you know, I'm going to go really early. It's 5 in the morning. I'm going to avoid Los Angeles traffic. We're going to get there. And so the sun wasn't out yet. It was still dark. The cars had their headlights on. And the hills were on fire. They were just blazing. And I can feel the heat through my car window. You can see kind of the fire lighting up the cars in front of us. And you know, everyone always says, and rightly so, you shouldn't stare at an accident when you're driving, or you shouldn't stare at, in this case, a disaster. But it was just so compelling that it felt like all of us were standing still and just watching this you know, this force of nature right in front of us. So Yeah, with the memory of the Thomas Fire and that kind of devastation, it was really this ominous and surreal experience. So that was really the first time that I encountered kind of face to face, literally, and in terms of kind of the consequences of this the destruction of wildfires. And I think that those memories and those experiences have always been kind of lingering for those 3 or 4 years, and slowly inched me towards this topic. I'm very interested in the destruction of the natural world in general in Homer, and this is a part of that. And I should also preface this by saying that this presentation is a small part of the larger dissertation project, which has to do, yes, with wildfires and how they're depicted in Homer and Hesiod, but is a part of a bigger whole. So enough about that. Let me get my PowerPoint up now. And here we go. Okay, and let's see if I can just do that here. Okay, good. So let's get started. The imagery of fire and fiery destruction in the Iliad of Homer has long been discussed by scholars as a symbol of Zeus's will and as a sign of the proleptic destruction of Troy. However, the imagery of conflagration and of the destruction of the natural world has further reaching implications, both within the narrative of Homer's poem and in the wider epic tradition. Today I want to do two things, and it's really just one big thing and one little thing. The first is to put forth that the Iliad situates itself in the wider epic tradition, especially in today's talk, in Hesiod's Theogony. So the Iliad situates itself as a moment of cosmic significance, a moment of critical importance for the progress of cosmic history as we know it, by way of the simile of Typhoeus in Book 2. And second, to very briefly suggest how this connection can frame the way or reframe the way that we view the role of the natural world and its destruction in the poem. Ultimately, I argue that the environmental devastation and fiery destruction coincide with irreversible moments of critical change in the human and divine worlds, signaling events of crisis that usher in new world orders. So first, it will be instructive to turn to 3 episodes in Hesiod's Theogony that demonstrate the language, themes, and imagery that resonate closely with those in the simile of Typhoeus in Book 2 of the Iliad. The first episode, and this will be the first handout here, takes place during the first generation of divinities as told in the Theogony, or the generation when Gaia and Uranos reign supreme before other generations of gods have entered the equation. Gaia has become burdened with the sort of non-birth of her children. The generation of Titans, seen as their father Uranos, continuously stuffs the children back into Gaia's womb. I don't know why I made this symbol sign for stuffing them back into Gaia's womb. That's what I imagine, I guess, as soon as they're born. And the narrator tells us that Uranos, as far as the children go, he hid the child, in Gaia's womb and did not let it return to the light. In response, we have these 2 lines here. Huge Gaia groaned within herself, being burdened or full, and she devised a tricky and wicked design. This moment is one of generational upheaval and change. Kronos, Gaia and Uranos' son, castrates his father, thus freeing his siblings from their mother's womb and cementing the generation of Titans, so called by Uranos because they are titanes, they are overreachers, and they committed a great deed with recklessness, he says. What's more, we note the presence of Gaia in this critical moment, or you can see it as a step in the progress of cosmic history. A theme of Gaia's in the Theogony for those of us who've read it, and a lot of work has been done on this as well. But we also note a verb that is uniquely used of Gaia's distress in the poem, stonakizeto, or stenakizito, to groan or to give forth a sound under repeated pressure. So this will be an important verb moving forward. The second episode involves yet another generational shift, the Titanomachy, or the Battle of the Titans, that pits the older generation of Titans led by Kronos against the new generation we come to know as the Olympians led by Zeus. After the Titans and the 100 Handers, who have just been freed by Zeus to help them in this fight as a result of Gaia's advice. After the Titans and the Hundred-Handers engage in battle that creates a massive din across the sea, earth, and sky, and a clamor that reaches both Tartarus and the high ether, Zeus descends from Olympus wielding thunder and lightning, and a divine conflagration takes place. And so for the sake of time, I won't read them aloud, but I'll be addressing kind of what I think is important in these passages. In his effort to decimate the generation of Titans, Zeus indirectly sets the entire world on fire: Gaia, the forests, the waters of ocean and sea. The entire world, Xthon-Paza, boils in fire. I suggest that this apocalyptic conflagration accompanies this critical moment and signals the collapse of, in this case, the old generation of Titans, and ushers in the new world order of Zeus and the Olympians. The last episode in the Theogony combines the audible groan of Gaia as seen in the Uranos episode, together with the environmental conflagration seen in the Titanomachy, all while once again marking an event of crisis in the history of the cosmos, the challenge and defeat of Typhoeus, the final child of Gaia and Tartarus. As in the Titanomachy, Zeus first announces his presence in the battle through sound. Thunder reverberates through Gaia, sky, sea, ocean, and Tartarus. As he strides down Olympus, his steps shaking the mountain's very foundations, Gaia groans underneath his immortal feet. And this is number 1. This is the same verb we saw used of Gaia in her distress at Uranos, stuffing her children back inside her womb. Gaia plus a form of ston or stenakidzo, again a key phrase for the resonance of Gaia in the wider epic tradition in Book 2 of the Iliad, which we'll turn to shortly. After the intended target, Typhoeus, is struck by Zeus's lightning and thunder. We are told that the whole earth boiled, the sky and the sea. Edzee de Xthon-Paza. This is number 3. Sorry, number 2 is just a translation, obviously, of number 1. So this is number 3 on the PowerPoint. Edzee de Xthon-Paza, the same phrase used in the defeat of the generation of Titans above, Theogony 695. After Zeus sets fire to all the heads of Typhoeus, Typhoeus collapses, and beneath him, again, huge Gaia groaned, Stenakidze de Gaia Pelore, and this is number 4 on the PowerPoint. The distress of Gaia frames the beginning and end of the battle. She announces Zeus's descent from the Olympus and the collapse of Typhoeus upon him. But even so, this crisis moment in cosmic history is commemorated, like the Titanomachy, by conflagration and cataclysmic destruction of the natural world. And this is slide. So Gaia and the greater natural world become collateral damage in a conflict of cosmic significance. The world is set on fire by lightning that seems to leap unrestrained from the body of Typhoeus, lightning from Zeus that reflects their wielder's power and influence upon the cosmos. The devastation and conflagration of the natural world, of Gaia, the sea, the trees, represents a change in the world order. In Hesiod, it marks the defeat of the Titans and ascension of Zeus and the Olympians to power, as well as the defeat of Typhoeus, who the narrator tells us would have been lord over gods and men, an irreversible deed unless Zeus got involved, thus cementing Zeus's ultimate rule. When we read the simile of Typhoeus in Book 2 of the Iliad next to its Hesiodic counterpart, and trace these similar characteristics, we are invited to reframe the way we think about and explore the imagery of the destruction of the natural world in the poem, affirming the events of the Iliad as just such moments of grave significance. So let's turn at last to Homer. The first 3 books of the Iliad, particularly Iliad 2 and 3, have often been discussed as, in a sense, replaying the beginning of the origin of the Trojan War. During the Catalogue of Ships, for example, itself literally counts off every Achaean ship that came to Troy, as well as the Trojans and their allies. It also presents interesting bits of information, like who the first Achaean was to set foot on the beaches of Troy, who was immediately killed, like Protesilaus. So again, it's kind of giving us information on the very first day of contact between the Achaeans and the Trojans. Book 3 presents a one-on-one duel between Menelaus and Paris, winner take Helen, and ends with oaths being broken by Paris and the Trojans, much like the taking of Helen and the violation of Xenia at the home of Menelaus, which arguably is one of the reasons that started the Trojan War, on human terms at least. Furthermore, while this duel is taking place in Book 3, Priam and the elders of Troy sit on the walls of the citadel with Helen, what's often referred to as the Teikoskopia, asking her who this Achaean warrior is and who that is, as if they didn't know over 9 years who Odysseus was, or who Agamemnon, the Lord Commander of the Achaean army, was. It's pretty strange that in 9 years of war, this is the first time that King Priam is invested in who these Greeks are. So this feels like the beginning of the Trojan War because, for all intents and purposes, this is the beginning of the Trojan War as far as the narrative of Homer's Iliad is concerned. We're starting in medias res in the 9th year of the war, and these opening books kind of provide the context for what's going to follow. And as the beginning of the Trojan War is a momentous occasion with generational implications as well, it is appropriately and conveniently, for the purposes of my paper, marked by the cosmic characteristics as we just saw in Hesiod. In Iliad 2, after the Achaean army comes together and Agamemnon, Athena, and the other Achaean kings marshal the army together, battle becomes sweeter to them than to go back in their hollow ships to the beloved land of their fathers. The first simile used of the army, the first kind of extended simile, which sets off a chain of 4 similes involving birds, insects, and goat herds. So a lot of the natural world here, is the following is actually a wildfire simile, and that is there. Fire and conflagration, as we saw earlier in Hesiod, are symbols that accompany critical moments in the history of the cosmos. In Hesiod's Theogony, Gaia, trees, ocean, and sea are often set ablaze during these moments, during the defeat of the generation of Titans and that of Typhoeus. Here the image of fire is used to describe the brilliant gleam of the Achaean army's bronze armor and weapons, with the association of destruction and devastation inherent in the image presented, an obliterating fire through a forest. On their own, an image of the devastation of the natural world, or the burning of a forest and a mountain, are hardly signals of cosmic significance in the Iliad. However, the recurring instances of these phenomena, paired together with more acute links to the wider epic tradition, like the defeat of Typhoeus at the hands of Zeus, or the groans of Gaia, as we just saw, do suggest a closer connection. After the narrator recounts the Achaean catalog of ships and tells also who was the best and the bravest of the Achaean men and the horses, strange little addition there, but cool, the army advances. And we have here the Typhoeus simile in question. Gaia groans, using the same verb used in Hesiod, hupo plus stenakizo in this case, just after a thorough review of the army, highlights the sheer amount of physical bodies present and gathered together on her. The army advances as if all the earth were eaten by fire. The image of the entire earth set ablaze as Gaia groans recalls the moments in Hesiod's Theogony where this conflagration takes place, during Zeus's entry into the Titanomachy and after the defeat of Typhoeus at Zeus's hands. Furthermore, this image links closely to the simile used for the Achaean army we saw previously in the previous slide, where they are again compared to fire. Gaia groans beneath the marching army of Achaeans as if Zeus, who delights in thunder, were angry, as when he batters Gaia about Typhoeus. The reference to Typhoeus takes us directly, and in no abstract sense anymore, to the moment in Hesiod's Theogony where Zeus defeats Typhoeus with lightning and fire and prevents him from becoming lord over gods and men. This moment is a critical moment wherein exists the potential for generational change and a new world order where, nevertheless, as the narrator tells us, Typhoeus is ultimately defeated thanks to Zeus being highly intelligent and powerful. Finally, to finish on this slide, before the narrator turns at last to the Trojan side and to their own review of army and allies, the last 2 lines of the passage read, "Thus beneath their feet Gaia groaned loudly to men marching, who made their way through the plain in great speed." The simile of Typhoeus is bookmarked by the groans of Gaia in 2:781 and 2:784, with the expected verb used, stenakizo. This neatly frames the passage. Gaia groans, specifically here, beneath the feet of the Achaean soldiers who are on their way to battle. In Theogony 8:42-3, as we looked at earlier, Gaia groans, the verb epistenakizo, beneath the immortal feet of Zeus, who himself is descending from Olympus on his way to battle to defeat Typhoeus. What ensues, of course, in Hesiod is the decimation of Typhoeus and the conflagration of Gaia. And here too, as we've seen, we are presented with images of conflagration that accompany the groans of Gaia. Taken together then, the imagery of environmental conflagration, the language of Gaia's distress, and the direct link to the mythos of Typhoeus all situate the Iliad as a critical moment in the history of the cosmos, a moment of crisis and generational strife and change that is on par with the defeat of the generation of Titans and the suppression of the threat of Typhoeus. Gaia is the catalyst of the New World Order. Her chthonic groans compel change, and her conflagration signals end and new beginnings. When Gaia groans, the universe demands action and insists upon progress, both of which are announced by the elements of fire. Okay, so now quickly before I conclude, my second part here, a very brief suggestion of how we might use this connection to think about the natural world in the Iliad. How we might revisit the depiction of the natural world and its destruction in the poem, if the imagery of environmental devastation can be seen to be characteristic of these momentous events in the history of the cosmos, and that the Iliad is placing itself among such moments in history, then we might consider other examples of the destruction of the natural world to be contributing to this cosmic connection, if you will, as well. That is to say, that these moments in the Iliad play out or re-perform, in a sense, the environmental destruction that is evoked through the simile of Typhoeus. Thus, for example, the felling of a tree in a simile or in narrative action, which both happen in the Iliad, or the burning and boiling of the river god Scamander, do not just contribute to the narrative ends of the poem to underscore the untimely death or the heroism of a fallen soldier, or to symbolize the future sack of Troy, but can instead be seen to trigger, in a sense, the cosmic link that marks the poem's events as significant and as a site of change. In conclusion, then, I've tried to show that setting the world on fire in the Iliad and the wider epic tradition, as seen in Hesiod's Theogony, signals a moment of crisis and significant change, establishing new world orders or quelling generational upheaval. The same might be said of our situation, at least in California. Climate change is increasing the likelihood and intensity of extreme weather events and natural disasters, and for us here in California, that especially means wildfires. As I mentioned at the start, the Thomas Fire in 2018 was the largest in California's history. Since then, 6 subsequent fires have had that ominous distinction. I mean, it's unbelievable, really. The wildfires here are themselves, by their increased frequency and intensity, signs of changes happening in our environment and the way that we live our lives, changes that are affecting us now and have in the past and are affecting our future. And often it's affecting people who are in our most vulnerable communities. One can only hope that we act in the face of these, signs, ominous portents. Thank you. And how do I stop?
Okay. Thank you very much, Julio, for your excellent presentation. I guess now I can open the discussion on both topics. Please ask your questions to the speakers by raising hands with the button.
We've got a question, I believe. Yes?
Did I not hear you? Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, so I've got a question directed towards Julio. Thanks at first for both the excellent presentation and the timely context it exists in. Me speaking here from Germany, I do not have the same experience with wildfires, but climate change has been gnawing at our local vegetation to a great degree, and many of the forests I used to walk through as a child do not exist anymore in the same way. It is commonly assumed, at least in regards to archaeology, that the Trojan War or whichever conflict served as maybe a real life, a real life counterpart to it, as described by Homer, occurred during the Middle to Late Bronze Age, a time which in itself saw several cases of earthquakes and other kinds of natural phenomena that featured large changes in the environment. Do you know anything about the archaeological evidence and how that might pertain to your thesis? So, especially in regards to natural catastrophes and phenomena at the time of the, or at least at the assumed time of the late Bronze Age, and with regards to the real life conflict that inspired the Iliad and other descriptions of the Trojan War.
Maybe you could unmute your phone, microphone.
Okay, great, thanks. Yeah, no, thank you for that question. It's always, to try and kind of put together, to try and piece together, the historical kind of evidence of the Trojan War, or as you say, whatever war did take place, is always fascinating to put together with the literary sources. I have to admit that at the moment, I'm not an expert on the archaeology of the site of Troy, but what I would say is, as you say, during the Bronze Age, a lot of kind of natural disasters that are happening seemingly simultaneously, and my topic kind of focused today on wildfires, but Homer also details a lot of other kind of natural disasters, and I mentioned the flooding that followed from the Thomas Fire here in Santa Barbara, and there's a lot of similes in the Iliad as well of flooding, and we have wildfires, and we have descriptions of dry wood that's broken more easily when describing kind of heroes as swollen rivers. And I'm not sure about earthquakes in particular, but judging from just the literary sources, there's evidence of knowledge of these kinds of very devastating natural disasters, of course, often attributed to gods or to some, more than human power. So for me, that's where I would turn to, is to kind of look at these examples. But as far as the archaeological evidence goes, unfortunately, I can't give you any more than what we've discussed already.
Thank you very much. That is actually quite enlightening already. It's interesting how much of a large scope of different natural phenomena is described in this, in the end, very human conflict, although it, of course, involves the gods as well.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. I have a question to Maxwell. How do you think maybe unconsciousness is the worst disaster? How do you think?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I can't say I'm any sort of expert in Greek philosophy or thought on the subject, but from what I understand, just being consciousness and not having the ability to wake up after is the worst experience for a Greek. No chance of an afterlife, just in limbo. Even worse than being perhaps transformed into an animal. And so, yeah, and of course, no culture can really say exactly what happens after death. And so with this episode, just having this character death, the audience might get a small glimpse of that very fear that they have, like the worst disaster, as you said. And, I think that really produces a very vivid, or we might say energetic, coming from energeia, experience for Homer's audience. If I can actually talk a little bit about Philip's question, I can't so much say anything about the archaeology of Troy, but today I'm coming to you masquerading as a philologist and actually being an ancient historian. It's really interesting how a number of major religious sites, such as the Temple of Artemis, I believe at Ephesus, as well as Temple of Apollo, or just the site of Delphi in general, the northwest side of the Temple of Artemis is directly along a major fault line that runs through the city. And unfortunately, I have a picture of it. I can't show it to you today. There's a cleft in the mountains around Delphi that leads into the site. It's a very present image. And there were multiple earthquakes that happened at Delphi and devastated the site. So it's interesting how connected disasters are to Greeks' idea of religion. And going forward with this project that I'm doing, and just in my work in general, that's something I hope to explore more as well and draw on archaeological evidence. So thank you for bringing that to mind.
Thank you. That's a very valuable addition.
Yes. Another questions? Don't be shy, please. Ask the questions.
Okay, since I'm kind of on a roll here right now, another question towards you, Maxwell. So you mentioned that Poseidon served this purpose as not exactly a god of the sea itself, but rather as a god of the conjunction or convention of land and sea, or of the clashes between sea and land. So, which is why he's also the god of earthquakes, for example, or would you say that with nautical travel becoming easier over time, with nautical travel becoming easier, and maybe even the defenses against natural disasters becoming more sophisticated during the classical and later the Roman period, that maybe that was when this depiction of Poseidon as this more benevolent deity, as this deity who's basically Father Neptune, just sitting at the bottom of the ocean with his trident in hand, and being not so much a destroyer as rather a benefactor of sea travelers. Would you say that emerged from this evolution of certainty towards the sea, or security towards the sea?
I think that's an excellent question. And there are a couple of pieces that I probably have to touch on there. I wouldn't say there's a direct connection between this transition from Poseidon being, interacting between the land and sea, and then later with the Roman period being mostly a god of the sea and more benevolent. I think the issue previously in how our modern conception of Poseidon developed was based largely on the Roman god Neptune, which in some ways, of course, draw parallels, but could be conceived differently in how they developed the religious cults in the two Roman and Greek cultures. So that's the first piece. The second piece would be, even with the Roman Neptune, I think he's still rather violent, just with the number of shipwrecks, of course, is always a major concern. The Romans had some slight development of insurance cohorts put together to protect against shipwrecks because they happen so often. We can see in Horace, he has 3 different categories of water in his odes. In the one relating to the Mediterranean Sea, as opposed to, say, like streams or rain, is rather violent and portrayed in a negative sense. Even just, we can say simply with, Caligula declaring war against Poseidon, there's still that issue of Poseidon as an enemy and not just this benefactor. So there's the beauty and the efficiency that comes with trade over the sea, but underneath we still have this very dangerous aspect to the god. So that's how I would begin to approach your question.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Somebody else?
If there are any questions, oh, go ahead.
Okay, I was going to ask you a question. So
I was going to ask you.
Great. Yeah, I mean, I may have, kind of, you piqued my. I immediately started paying even more attention. Not that I wasn't paying attention to your presentation, but when you mentioned cosmic destruction, I think with Amphikalupto. And I just wonder if you can talk a little bit more. I mean, obvious intersection. I think I said cosmic destruction like 25 times in my presentation, or cosmic, progress or some form of that. So I just wonder if you can talk a little bit more about that and how, how other instances maybe where that appears, or other kind of, adjacent connections to that concept.
Yeah, absolutely. Unfortunately, like I said, there are only those 3 Amphikalupto ones where we can point directly to this sense of cosmic destruction as a motif. But in terms of potential destruction, perhaps of individuals, major example would be in Book 5 of Odyssey, which I believe is between lines 282 and then 381. So about 100 lines we have there. I have some notes here actually on this. We have this same repetition of enosikthon as well as form of Kalupto, not Amphikalupto, but Odysseus, as he's in the shipwreck caused by Poseidon. He gets enveloped by a wave. He's worried about, I guess, being drowned, enveloped by the sea. That's an image. Also, we can think about the name, Calypso. He had just come from that island, escaped this concealment, coming now into the sea, and he's experiencing perhaps, if he drowns, a more permanent concealment. It even talks about at some point where the garments given to him by Calypso have just been stripped away from him in the shipwreck, but immediately he gets nearly swallowed by a wave. So that's a major instance that I would point to. In terms of cosmic destruction, I might have to leave that up to you at the moment. Just because I've only been able to locate those 3 instances pertaining to a theme. But if I have a question for you as well, if that's all right, if we can exchange like this. Have you looked at all at book 21 and the episode with Achilles fighting the river, I think it's Xanthus, where Achilles has to be saved by Hephaestus coming in with his flames and not knocking the river back? Can you see any parallels between your work in Iliad Book 2 and the Theogony with that episode?
Yeah. Am I okay? I'm not muted. So for the sake of the presentation, I mentioned it in one line at the end, right? That's one instance that is you know, the similes of the Iliad are famously, you know, talked about, and I have books and books on my shelf of you know, how to read the similes, and they have a lot of natural aspects, and there's a lot of animal similes in the natural world, but there are very few that actually show up both in the similes and in the kind of narrative action. Some of those are tree similes, which is why I'm really interested in trees and how they're destroyed all the time. But also the conflagration also is enacted, and that's in one of the moments is Scamander, and Brooke Holmes has talked, you know, beautiful, one of my favorite articles that she wrote on I think it's called Situating Scamander in 2015, and she talks about kind of the role of Scamander as not just kind of a river god, but as kind of a protector and a caregiver, and also a life-sustaining force for, you know, all the life that dies in that moment you're referring to, kind of when everything gets set on fire. There's this really almost sick description of how all the fish and all the kind of the biodiversity that gets burned up alive in this conflagration. So yes, the answer is definitely does fit. It's, you know, it fits into kind of the larger project that I'm looking at, in terms of kind of the destruction of the natural world as a whole in the poem. And yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, we can actually match some of the language, like boiling of the river, one-to-one with the theogony, which is something I didn't put on the presentation, but could have easily gone on there. So you're absolutely right to point to it. It's a very unique moment of, you know, Achilles as man becoming like a natural force, and the other way around. The river also becomes like a man who wants to kill another man. So yeah, I can talk about that forever, but the short answer is definitely yes, and it's a very, very fascinating passage.
Great.
Thanks for that. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Julio. Someone else? We have half an hour for discussion. How do you think, Marta?
Well, actually, we can, I think because one of our participants weren't able to be here today, unfortunately also to the coronavirus, so it's our second participant that was unable today to present. I think we may, of course, discuss a little bit, but if there was, you know, if there will be no questions right now, because you always can, you know, get in touch with the participants, we strongly encourage that. This is what you know, what the conference are for. We may end our today's meeting a little early. So if there's any questions, please, maybe this is the time for the, I think, last questions.
I've also included in the chat my email in case anyone has any questions later on. So.
Thank you, Maxwell. I have to say that if anyone wants to have a contact to anyone else, because we didn't include the email addresses in the abstract books, please contact me and I will contact the exact person and then contact you back. So there will be no problem to getting in touch with anybody. Professor Osek, I think it's
I'm still waiting.
Well, I suppose that it won't be any questions at that moment. So, well, perhaps we're going to finish this session. Professor, is that okay?
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Orsek, for chairing this session, and thank you for our excellent participants for the excellent speeches. Very intriguing. A lot of ancient Greek to remember. Thank you for that. And well, this was our final session for today. I will invite you to the second session tomorrow at 11 a.m. but Polish time. Please note that. We are very sorry, Julio. I know it's probably middle of the night for you. It's just you are in the, the farthest west possible for. And we also got people from Asia, so it was really a task to actually schedule the program. So well, I would like to thank every person that participated today, and I'm hoping that we will see each other in the same squad tomorrow. So thank you very much for today. A bit of virtual applause for everybody here, and we will see each other tomorrow. Please, for the participants for the first session, please, it would be very important if you arrived 5 minutes before the start of the first session tomorrow at 11 a.m. Thank you very much, and have a great night, afternoon, or morning, depends on your time zone. Thank you.
Everybody, thank you.
Good night.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, guys.
Thank you. Bye.
Very much thanks. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.